There it is.
Why is it doing that?
Mic check. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Okay, I can hear you on the computer. Leave it up so I can see if it ever turns off.
You ready?
You want to lead off from it?
I want to lead. Hey, Instagram.
Good morning.
It's like it is early here. We decided to do this nice and early
5:30.
so the kids would all be asleep.
We're in New Jersey at Giselle's sister's house. So the kids are playing with their cousins. It was a late night.
Yeah. And I figured perfect opportunity for us to wake up early and not have anyone wake up.
Absolutely.
So today, why do we bring you here today? Why do we create this page? A big part of our vision with this new channel is simply sharing our story from our vantage point. Recently, my husband has been doing a lot of men's work and doing courses and going to retreats. And I've done the same for the past few years. And one thing that, keeps coming up for us is rarely ever are the people facilitating, have a big family or have a lot going on. And we feel like we could be that voice, or at least we can share our experience on, how we do this work while having a big family, while having 4 children. And also where both of us weren't in alignment in the beginning, it was like speaking 2 languages, when one person speaks one language and the other one speaks another, you don't understand each other. You might get bits and pieces here and there, but there's, a lack in the communication, and things don't flow when you can't communicate fully with someone. And now we're at a point where we're speaking the same language, and we kind of want to just take you guys through that journey of what it's been like for us, where we started to where we are now.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight October 2021. My wife just told me she wanted a separation, and I'm starting here for a specific reason. The next 9 months have been transformational for me, but in that moment, a couple days after she had said, "Hey, I want a separation," I had all these like emotions and overcome, just it was overflowing. And I remember sitting there on the beach. I had my 4 kids, and my wife was at home doing her thing. And I sat on the beach and I said I had 2 options, right? I could just continue to plug away at the life that I was at. Obviously wasn't working for us, and be disconnected with myself because I really didn't know what I wanted. Like I knew what I wanted, but deep down I didn't know what I wanted. Or I could dive in even deeper to the work that I had already committed to. I had signed up for Uncivilized Nation a few days previous, but I could dive deeper into that work. And so I chose that because I wanted to be more connected with myself and with Giselle. And like she had mentioned, we had seen so many people do this work that are single or that are in a relationship with no kids. And we've been thinking about this for a while, and we just wanted to start opening up because we've seen so much transformation between us 2 that we feel like our story and the things that we do would help someone else.
Yeah, so we're going to be taking it back to the beginning through these IG lives and slowly walking you through like a timeline of our lives up until this point. So back to the start, how we met.
Oh, my version's obviously a little bit different than her version, but I received orders to go to Afghanistan back in 2011, and I was in training much longer than she was. Just to jump fast forward to her, we were in a big PRT meeting, and it was the first time I ever saw her. I was sitting in the 3 rows in front of her, and I turn around and I see this beautiful woman, and I'm like, man, like who is this person? Like I haven't seen them throughout this whole training, and then they just show up on this. This was the very first meeting that I ever saw them, And I've always been a very attentive person on smaller things. Um, and I just kept telling myself like, wow, she's beautiful. She's amazing. Like that's the woman I'm gonna be with. I'm gonna be with that woman. And I didn't know how that looked, but I knew that I was gonna be with her. And uh, a couple days later, we were at a grappling session. In the military they call it combatives. In the army they call it combatives, and it was basically just grappling, hand-on-hand combat. And I had gone up. I thought her story will be a little bit different, but I thought that I was in the same group as them, kind of like their little, there's little groups in this combatives class. And I had just started off the conversation like, hey, look at that dude's toes. We were with a first lieutenant that was a good friend of mine. We went through training previous, and asked him about his toes, and that's the rest is history.
Um, so yeah, we had a short time frame to go wherever we wanted before we got deployed to Afghanistan. It was December break, and we had 10 days where we could go back home, see our family, whatever it was. And once we got back, we were gonna get deployed. And I figured it's a perfect opportunity to get to know him outside of this environment, because as most of you know, you're not supposed to be dating or seeing people in these environments, in this, training environment, getting ready to deploy to Afghanistan. So I invited him to New York, and we spent 5 days, and everything, checked out. Everything was great. And we got engaged 6 months after that. And 6 months after we got engaged, we were married. Within 3 months, we were pregnant with our first child. It was unexpected. It was not planned. Alex had, for whatever crazy reason, gotten a test for fertility. I didn't even know we weren't trying for children. And he comes back and he's like, I'm only 19% fertile. Chances are we'll never have kids. And I was like, well, 19 is still a lot. It's not 0. I was like, you hear the crazy stories of people who get vasectomies or aren't fertile having children all the time. So I was like, yeah, I don't know about that. And at the time I had gotten off birth control because I was becoming more aware of allowing my body to naturally do its processes and not using, pills or things to regulate something that is a very natural process. And yeah, lo and behold, 3 months later, we're pregnant because he stopped being careful, because in his head, he was not fertile and I was off birth control. And I cried the first time I found out I was pregnant. I bawled, I cried. I was 23 years old. In my 10-year plan that I wrote when I was 20, I wasn't going to have kids till I was 30. If you ever heard of Enneagram types, I'm a type 8. I plan a lot of things. Everything has a method and a way it should function. And I was like, yeah, kids, that's for the 30s. That's not for my 20s. So when I found out I was pregnant, sorry, there's mosquitoes all over out here.
And they love her.
Yeah, they love me. They're trying to eat me up right now. So yeah, when I found out I was pregnant, I cried, and I didn't tell him it took me about 2 days before I told him that I was pregnant. And he, of course, was in shock himself. I don't think either of us were planning or trying or ready to become parents at that time, at least not as far as we knew.
Yeah, no, I remember that specifically. We're in Chula Vista, what's La Mesa. We're in La Mesa, California, and she had come in the living room and she told me, and I was like, no way, like you're joking. Like I was just brushing it off, and then it hit me. I walked back to our bedroom, and it hit me when I was calling my dad and telling my dad that we were gonna be having a child, and I just started crying a little bit and breaking down. And they
So what came up for you there?
well, I think that, something I wanted to talk about, it's been brewing. It's either coming out here or coming out on an Instagram story, was, fathers don't often talk about the birthing process, right? That's not something that I experienced myself, and I've talked to many men, and the birthing process hasn't been talked about. And so like I didn't know, like, so for me, when I found out, I was in shock. I didn't know how to react. And you'll see that common theme, that pattern there throughout our first pregnancy. Like, I didn't really know what to do. And I, at that time, wasn't a point where I really wanted to look into it. And when I look back, that's one thing that I wish I would have changed, but it's also been a key proponent in why I've like changed and my view on a lot of things. So yeah, that's what came up.
Yeah, so I've after that, I would say, most things went normal. I was like, I have to go to a hospital. I have to, right away start seeing an OBGYN, get checked in, get everything checked out, know what hospital we're gonna birth in, start, setting up the baby room and doing your wish list and all that stuff. It was very much what I have seen growing up in movies and televisions, from people around me. I was just falling into that track of doing what everybody else does. I had no idea of any other alternatives. And it wasn't until pretty late in my pregnancy, around 8 months pregnant, that I started joining communities, that people started reaching out to me and telling me about these other methods. So one big thing was I am a researcher. When it comes to things, I like to know pros, cons, for, against. All the information that I can soak up in that moment, I soak it up. So I started looking into circumcision. I looked at the pros for circumcisions. I looked at the people against circumcision. I looked at all the information I could find, the studies that I could find. And still up to that point, I was just kind of like, both sides have solid arguments. It wasn't, like one side's argument didn't make sense more than the other, because in my head, both, the people who are for circumcision and say, it's cleaner, it's gonna save them from future issues with their penises, all this. I was like, yeah, absolutely. Like, who wants to deal with their child, having a messed up penis or something possibly going wrong? And it wasn't till I said, you know what, if I'm gonna do this to my son, if at the time we didn't even know we were having a boy or a girl, it was just something that I wanted to prepare myself for in case we did. I said, I'm going to watch YouTube on it. I want to see the procedure. I would see what happens. And I'm here with my big old belly watching this YouTube video, watching them strap down this kid into this table, little infant, probably just a few days old or a couple of hours old, who knows. And when I hear that first wail, I just break down crying. And I was just like, oh my goodness. I was like, I could never do this to my son. I was like, I don't care what the doctors say. It was like a visceral reaction that I had. And at the time, I didn't know anything about full body yes, or, gut intuition or any of that. I just knew that my body was like, fuck no, this is not happening to my child. And I went up to him right away and I was like, have you ever seen a circumcision? Like, do you even know what happens? And he, of course, is like, no. And I was like, just watch this video. And did you even get through the video?
I didn't watch the video when you
Yeah.
told me to watch the video. So I remember this story pretty vividly. I was at the shipyard. She had came and gave me lunch, and she said, "Hey, we're not circumcising our kid, our son, if it's a boy." And I said, like many men, I said, "No, you're not the man. Like I'm the man. I've been circumcised. Like I know, I know this." And I didn't know how to internalize and to understand what I was going through, like internally, to like come back and have like a solid conversation. Like I immediately shut down. I'm like, you don't know. I
Yeah.
know. I know. I'm the man. I know.
Yeah.
And I didn't watch it. We got in a massive argument in the parking lot outside of the shipyard in San Diego. And then a few days later, I was like, man, she's serious. Like she's hardcore about this. Let me
Well,
watch it.
because then after that, I was like, okay, he won't listen to me because it's a feeling, right? It's not statistics. It's not science-based. And I said, okay, I'm gonna hit him with the data. And I started looking up the data, showing him like how many countries actually do this, how, all the statistics that I could find, obviously, for the reasoning why I was making this choice. And I said, you understand like the majority of everywhere else around the world does not circumcise. If this truly was about cleanliness and cancer and all this, then these countries would be drowning in like penile dysfunction.
And
You know?
I do remember, this, my main argument was, it's a lot cleaner,
Yeah.
right? And like, that was I was stuck on that. And the reason why and I kept bringing this up is, you know, like, that's what I was told by my father, like, and I was told by other men that were circumcised is, oh, it's cleaner, right? And I didn't do that research. I didn't go outside the box because that's what I was told. And then once
just-
she, yeah, once
yeah,
she shone the light.
If no one's done the research, you know, obviously the penis has its own built-in ways to clean itself. And as long as you're, you know, showering and bathing, like it's gonna be fine. It's like a finger, just clean it around. Once the boys get old enough to retract, they can retract it. Never force retraction. And yeah, and most of the times nothing goes wrong. It's a lot of times it is in the circumcised men that start having issues when they're older. The whole UTI myth, it's not really a thing. There's just a lot of false information out there. And if you start looking into it, like a big thing for me was, why did this all start? And it actually started with Kellogg, like the man from the cereal, like the cereal name you see, Kellogg. Back in the day, he was a very religious man. And he didn't like that boys went around tugging that skin. And in his head, it was like, if you chop it off, they'll stop doing that, you know, because that's sin. You're not supposed to touch your body. You're not supposed to play with yourself. And I told him, I said, we have now become a society that has applied scientific research to something that a religious nut came up with decades ago, and no one has gone back to like research it or see why did this even start. And that was like another big part of my argument. I was like, you know, if you sit here, like so many things in history start like that, right? One person had an idea, came up with something, and decades later is completely different than the initial reason why it even started. But we don't know that, and we're still following that track because, well, that's what, you know, so and so has been doing for 20 years, but nobody knows that that's not the reason why it even started.
And I would like to say that neither of our sons have had issues in their 8 and 6 years of existence with it. So my obvious thoughts of it's dirty is not true.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't write out ask my father, but I was like 99.9% sure that he was never circumcised and that I know he's never had issues. So I started thinking back like the men in my life, right? And I was like, okay, who do I know that I feel comfortable enough having this conversation? My dad was not one of them. But I remember a cousin of mine, and the only reason I remember is I have this memory of like, I was probably like 6 or 7 years old, maybe 8. He was taking a bath. And I just remember his mom going in and going, fuck, you didn't wash your penis, wash it again. And I was like, and I didn't know what she did, but I was like, I don't think he's circumcised. So I called him up and I was like, this is gonna be weird. I was like, I don't really want to know much more. I just want you to answer a simple question. Like, has not being circumcised ruined your life? And his blunt response was, it ain't stopped no bitch from sitting on my dick. And I was like, all right, cool. I don't want to talk about your penis anymore. and to me, that was just, you know, like I had to talk to real men for me to be like, okay, what troubles have you actually gone through? You know, like he was already an adult. He clearly had lived with his penis and used it plenty of times. I was like, does it really cause issues? And he said no.
Yeah, and I think that like if we like dive a little bit deeper, like the circumcision, like that moment and before Grayson was born was one point of like looking inward and changing, right? And I don't think I analyzed it at that depth then, but when I look at it from this point of view, it was like that continuous over the course of our relationship. There has been things that it's taken time for me to look at and say, okay, you know, this isn't the traditional way like I've been raised, but it is a way that I feel like I'm comfortable with and that I have all the information and we are making the best decision for our kids. And I will admit, but I'm more involved now. Like I wasn't as involved in those situations because I didn't. My priority, I've always said this until recently, was to provide for the family, and I left a lot of those decision making items to Jasil.
Yeah, I'll leave it at this. Another big point about circumcising young children is you never know what length their penis will get to once they hit puberty. So in birth, how do you know how much skin to cut off? And the truth is no doctor knows because you have no idea what puberty is going to look like. And what doesn't happen to everyone, but it does happen to some men, is that they cut too much and then their penis cannot fully, grow to the length it can. It can cause painful sacs. Sometimes their skin rips and they'll have multiple scar tissues. There's a lot of negative things that can happen, and circumcisions do go wrong. There are botched circumcisions. This isn't something that isn't out there. Like just go on a Google search and read these men's story. And that was a big part of my research. Was I dove so deep, like I found communities of, like blog and comments of men after man talking about how their penis was ruined. And, now they're grown ass men, married, having all these issues in the bedroom, all because of a procedure done to them during infancy. So my thing was to him, if you can take responsibility for your son's penis ever being ruined, then by all means, I said, can you take full responsibility for that? When your son's 15, can you look him in the eyes and say, oops, my bad, I chose wrong. I was like, that's a huge part of a man. It's everything to most men. Like, that's an extension of your life force. Do you want that to be ruined? But I'll leave that. I think
Yeah,
it was a big hurdle for us. Yeah, because it kind of came to, I don't want to say an ultimatum, but the hospital did say if one parent says yes and one parent says no, they won't do it. And I told him, okay, you can say yes all you want. I'm going to say no all I want. So
well, I think that's a springboard.
Yeah.
That topic is a springboard into the birthing topic, right?
Yeah.
And how initially you, right, and we'll get into it a little bit, but you were like, this is not how I envisioned it. You did the research and then you made that transition.
Yeah.
And then, I like many things, I got on board after I did my own research and bought in and saw it firsthand. So
Yeah.
that does play into what we're here.
And I mean, the next thing is the birth. I had a 12-hour labor with my first son. It started around midnight. And I had told him last possible minute to the hospital, because by that time, around 30-ish weeks, I had a lot of little things that fed into me changing what I wanted those last like 10 weeks of pregnancy. I had an aunt who was going through a nursing school at the time, and she knew I was pregnant, and she called me up one day and she's like, Mija, have you ever seen The Business of Being Born? I was like, no, I have no idea what that is. It's a documentary by Ricky Lake. At the time it was on Netflix. I don't think you can find it on Netflix anymore. And she said, well, you have to watch it. Like it opened my eyes to so much. And I said, okay. So I watched this documentary, and after that, I was like, I'm having a home birth. Like, I'm not going to the hospital. And I don't know if I told him or not, but I called up TRICARE. At the time, that was our medical insurance. And I asked them like, hey, I want to switch to a midwife. And of course, they're like, oh, you're past blah, blah, blah weeks. We can't do the switch. And I didn't know at the time. So I was just like, oh, I can't have my home birth, I guess. I just need to be at the hospital. And I wasn't that heartbroken about it because I was already pretty set on, doing the whole hospital thing. So I was just like, okay, I guess, I'll birth in a hospital because I don't have a choice.
Yeah.
And I believe that I didn't have a choice. Ladies, you do.
Well, I don't think I'm getting my births mixed up here, but I'm pretty sure that after you made that phone call to TRICARE and asked for a home birth, we looked to see if we could get to La Jolla's birthing center for women. Do you remember that? As like an alternative.
Yeah, we looked into a few methods. I try to reach out two individual midwives. And the thing is, anyone who's licensed is gonna abide by their license, right? So they don't want to do anything that would seem illegal for them to lose their license. And that's another big misconceptions people have, is that a midwife is somehow better than the hospital. And that all depends on the person. There's some amazing midwives out there, and there's some midwives that are exactly like having an OBGYN just outside of the hospital setting. But they would treat you and do all procedures just like a doctor would. And maybe they'll say during their interview, oh yeah, you can do whatever you want, this and that, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, you need to ask that midwife is, where are they willing to risk their license? Like, are they willing to let you go past 42 weeks pregnant? Are they willing to let you labor with waters open for more than 24 hours? Where are they willing to cross that line? Or is that line that they're not willing to cross because they abide to their license and they don't want to lose that license? And there are unlicensed midwives, underground midwives, radical birth keepers. Some of them are harder to find because they live in states where practicing is illegal. So, they protect themselves from getting found or being known that that's what they do. But there are different alternatives, choices that at the time I had no idea existed, which is, like I said, why we went with the hospital. So yeah, birthing time comes, but after watching that documentary, I knew that I wanted to be in the hospital at least as possible, because I knew it meant less intervention for the most part. I said, if the baby's already coming out, there's nothing to really do but get the baby out. So I waited till my contractions were a minute apart. I already had transitioned. I didn't know that at the time, but every single birth, I've had the same transition point, whereas I throw up or I feel like I'm going to throw up, and I already had thrown up twice. He gets home from work and takes us to the hospital. And once I get there, they're looking at me, I'm pretty calm, and they're like, oh, you're not in labor. I was like, oh no, yes, I am. Like, I've been laboring for 10 hours. And they're very nonchalant about everything because I was so calm. And when they go and check me, they're like, you're 9 centimeters. And then everybody starts going crazy. And I was like, I've been telling you guys, like, this baby's coming. Like, I know it's coming. Like,
Yeah.
I've been in labor for 10 hours and I already knew, but everything stalled, between all the checks. The nurses asking me hundreds of questions, like I had just came from a beach stroll, like I hadn't been just laboring for 10 hours. Like, my body shut down and it just stopped all process. Like, contractions were still happening, but everything felt like it completely stalled. And then they checked us into our room, and they have the monitors, and they had told me I didn't have to wear them. Now they're telling me I have to wear them. A nurse is coming in every 10 minutes. My grandma was there, he was there, and my grandma's so worried. And I was like, in my head, I was like, this woman has birthed so many kids. Like, what is she worried about? But it's that fear, that's been instilled in women, even these women who gave birth, decades ago, that birth is scary, that you die during birth, that there's all these emergencies and all these things that happen during birth. And then, of course, he's an anxious mess. And
Yeah, I was just thinking about a few things, and when you were talking about that, is once again, I reiterate the point, is like my relationship with my father and even my mother, this birthing process wasn't discussed with me. And so, like, I remember going to the hospital. I've always been like, I use the term traditional. It's like in the past, I was always about tradition, like, hey, well, hospital, you go to a hospital to give birth. And I never, and I look back and I remember this, I never believed in my wife's innate ability to give birth. And I kept, like, I was always pushing, like, hey, yeah, we're gonna go to the hospital. Even when we made those phone calls, like, deep down, I really wanted to go to the hospital. So when we get there, I remember when she was all nonchalant, like, I thought everything, like, oh, she's cool, everything was good, right? And I was very similar to the hospital staff when she's like, oh my God, you're 9 centimeters. We got to get you in the delivery room, right? And right when that happened, I remember Jisil threw up. She threw up again, like, threw everything up. And I started freaking out. I'm like, are you okay, babe? Are you okay? Like, how can I help? And that was what triggered, like, all the anxiousness, was like, I didn't know, like, I didn't do the research. I didn't do the research of, like, the processes of, like, kind of women go through in birth. So I didn't know that she was cleansing her body. She was getting rid of everything before she went through this process. And that triggered, or that came over to the delivery room where she was making these loud screams and she was moving around. I'm freaking out, trying to get her back in the bed, and she's going to the bathroom butt ass naked. And I'm like, hey, we have to get in the bed.
Yeah.
Like, you have to lay down and push, because what do they do in movies?
Yeah.
What do they tell you? Like, what do they show you in movies? The woman is sitting in a bed, right, giving birth that way. But after doing some research, and I know we'll get into it, that's probably like harder for the
Yeah,
woman, right? So
it is.
I'm sitting here like, get in the bed, get in the bed.
Yeah.
She's in the bathroom on the floor on all fours, and I'm like, Giselle, like, I had them. If you've ever, you can relate. If you ever had the mentality of like, for my kids, I'm like, let's do this in the car. Let's do this in the car. That's what with Giselle is like. We're in the bathroom. Get in the bed. Like, we'll have this conversation later.
Yeah.
And that wasn't helpful. I know it wasn't.
So the nurse, the reason I went to the bathroom is, one, obviously the bed was absolutely not comfortable. But the real reason I went to the bathroom is because I had my grandma and him just staring at me. And when I was in the room, and I can hear them murmuring and talking to each other and this and that. And it was just so annoying to me because I'm like trying to go really deep within myself. And then these two people like, and I know that all they're talking about is how I look like I'm dying, right? And the nurse kept coming in and bothering me. So I was like, if I go hide in the bathroom, maybe they will leave me alone. And he was standing at the door at one point, and I remember I just turned around in between contractions, and I said, and I pointed, there was a seat in the corner of the room, and I said, go sit in that chair. And I was like, do not come back unless I call you and I need help. I'm like, leave me alone. And I cornered both of them, and they left me alone after that. And yeah, I was in the bathroom was because my body was on fire. The bathroom was really cold. It was all like, bathroom tile floor. And it just felt really cold in there, where the room had regular tiling and it didn't feel as cold to me. And my body was, paused. Okay, we're back. The bathroom was literally so cold and it felt really good. And, they have the handicap bars, and I was using that to squat down, like just that squatting down position felt so good. And a nurse comes in at one point and looks at me, and she's like, are you bearing down? And still to this day, I was like, oh, so stupid. I said, yes. And I was like, yeah. And she's like, oh no, it's time to go to the bed. And after that, I was bedridden till I gave birth.
They gave you like that grab bar and everything.
Yeah, they got me a bar to try to squat. By then my legs gave out. So I ended up pushing on my back. I tried not to, but I didn't have a choice. I would have gone to hands and knees, but that wasn't it. They said that was not an option.
Yeah.
Which I also know, bullshit. Birth however you want. Push that baby out. Put your butt up in the air. And then I did coach pushing for, I want to say about 20 minutes. It was like 4 to 6 pushes. And I was screaming, and I had this nurse whisper in my ear, if you would stop screaming so much, you might get this baby out. And I was furious, but I couldn't say anything. I was like in the middle of trying to get a baby out. And I was like, this bitch. I was like, I would have punched her in the face right now.
Yeah.
And then after he was born, there was meconiums. My waters broke right before he emerged. And as soon as they saw the meconium, my room filled with like 30 people. I have no idea where these people came from. But all of a sudden, it became this big
People were
emergency.
freaking out. Like,
I'm talking about, we need to go get the midwife. We need to get this. We need to get that. The pediatric team, and the room is just like, and I just remember seeing like men, women, like all these people standing around me. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, I'm just giving birth. Like, why are all these people here? And later, I find out what the big deal of meconium in the waters was to hospital staff. Does not need to be a big deal in real life. And he was born. I didn't get to touch him right away. I just remember I see somebody grabbing him upside down. Right away, they whisk him to a table. And I just see them shoving this tube all the way down into his lungs.
So I do.
And he was more present there because obviously now I'm on the table and I'm covered in people trying to get my placenta out in this big emergency.
Yeah, so they pulled him. Obviously, she birthed him, and they as soon as he came out, he looked a little bluish. And he wasn't breathing right away, and they all freaked out, which
What-
was triggering me, like I'm sitting here like panicking and worrying. And they started to stick tubes down his throat and try to make him breathe. And then I think like 10 seconds later, max, or 15 seconds later, he started crying like a normal baby. Which goes into Grayson, our oldest, has a lot of throat issues. I say throat, but digestion, or he gulps a lot, like he wakes up in the middle of the night screaming sometimes. So I don't know if there's a direct correlation, but I know that that was a traumatic experience for both of us, because they pulled him away from her. And then just seeing all that, I'm like, damn. And then bringing all those hospital people in there for meconium, which I didn't know at the time. I'm sitting here like thinking something's about to happen, like our child's like in severe danger.
Yeah.
And that process happened, and then he started crying, and they just did all their checks on him. And and I don't know what you were going through in that process.
Well, knowing what I know now is like babies are not supposed to breathe the baby the moment they come out of the womb or the vagina. The reason why hospitals are so big on that is because what is the first thing they do? They clamp and cut the cord. So in doing so, they are actually cutting the baby off from their oxygen supply. So in a home birth or a home setting where you leave the placenta, you leave the umbilical attached, the baby is still getting that oxygen for the first couple of minutes. And you see it in the cord because the cord looks alive. The cord is pulsing still. When the cord stops doing that, you can see it drain of color and it turns white over time. And that's how you know that there's no longer use of the cord, which mostly by then, the baby's doing it all on its own. I didn't know that at the time. I thought, babies need to breathe the moment they come out. And, if you wrap your head around the process of birth, right, it's a very intense process for the mother, just as it is for the baby. They just came out of a water environment that they've spent 9 to 10 months in. And now they just come into this world, and we expect them within the first 10 seconds to, oh, I know how to use my lungs. Like they haven't been doing that, right? They have not been using their lungs. They have no idea how to do it, but they'll figure it out, right? And we just have to give time for that process to occur. So yeah, they whisk him away. After that, they give him back and they let us do, the golden hour. And I get to hold my baby underneath a blanket for about an hour. And they also wanted him to latch and me to breastfeed before they moved me into the next room. And that was another hospital experience. This nurse is manipulating his jaw open, shoving him onto my breast. And then she tells dad, this is how you can help. You stand behind her, you open his mouth, you have her, and then you and the whole time I was like, this is so aggressive. This is so uncomfortable. I don't want him doing that to the baby or shoving him onto my breast. Like, this is so weird. And this is not going to happen outside of this
I
hospital.
remember them making us watch a generic latching video
Yes.
too, while we were holding him.
Yeah, and it's not to say that breastfeeding is easy and no one needs any type of pointers, but babies are born knowing how to do this on their own. They don't need you to shove their jaw open and like shove your entire breast into their mouth. The majority of babies can do this. Once again, it goes all back to the process. If there's continuous interruptions in this process, it kind of just creates all these ripples that continue to flow downwards. And when it comes to breastfeeding, when it comes to bonding with your baby, when it comes to all this, and I know this because afterwards I had 3 free births and they were completely different from this first experience I had. And then still in that room, so I want to say no more than an hour of him being born, I got asked if I wanted to give him the hepatitis B vaccine. And at the time I hadn't looked a lot into vaccines, but I knew some of them. I knew about that one because I knew that that was one that the hospital would offer. These mosquitoes are insane out here. So I looked into it and I saw how you can get hepatitis B. So when they asked me that, I I was just like, in my head, I was like, what the fuck? I was like, why would I vaccinate my kid against hepatitis B? He's not going to do drugs and share needles, and no one's having sex with him. How else will he get hepatitis B? And I was just like, no. I was like, no. And it wasn't that I was against vaccines or anything. It just made no fucking sense in my head. I was like, you want me to vaccinate my kid against something that he's not going to do? Like, I know he's not going to get into needles. I'm his mom. And I know he's not having sex. He's a fucking infant. And I was like, this is ridiculous. And I left it at that. And that, I don't know if you
Yeah, no,
have anything to say there.
I was gonna say that like, that was one thing that we had, when we met in Afghanistan and we talked, going back to that for a second, we talked about everything. We
Yeah.
talked about how we were going to, at the time, we were gonna punish our kids by spanking them. We were going to do the vaccines. We were gonna do everything like the normal traditional, parents. And as we got closer to Grayson being born, Jasil switched on a lot of things, right?
Everything.
And I'm sitting, I will admit, I was sitting here like,
We talked
we
about
talked
this.
about this, like,
Like,
this
what
is
the
this,
fuck?
why are you going against what we talked
Yeah.
about? And where she had done that research and she switched, I hadn't. I was focused on my career, I was focused on the Navy, I was focused on going out to sea, because we were going out to sea on and off.
And I remember that was a big argument of mine was, if you're going to go against what I want, then do the research,
Yeah.
read an article, come to me with solid evidence on why you want what you want. And he never had an answer.
I never did. And so
He
I
never
remember
did.
in the hospital when they asked about the vaccines, I said yes, she said no, right? And so once again with the yes and no. And going back on, like, looking back at it now, I'm thankful that that was there, because I don't agree with that either. Like, I especially with hepatitis B, like, my kids aren't gonna be having sex, anytime soon. So like, why is that like a big thing? So I do remember like being so upset with her internally. I never vocalized that, but I was so upset with her internally, not just on circumcision, but on the vaccines as well, because of that. And so like if I could go back and give someone advice, is like, when it comes to your conversations as a couple, yes, you want to have that surface level conversation, but also like dive deep and say like, hey, things might change, and obviously you have to do the research, because me and her, we were like, oh yeah, we're firm in our belief, and it changes, but like, you have to really open yourself up to the other side, right?
And I always say, like, once you start questioning things, like, why am I feeling this way? Why do I want this? Questions bring curiosity, which makes it a lot easier to have these conversations. And what we lacked at the time was that curiosity, right? We were more focused on who was right and why am I right, right? Like, he was right to him and I was right to me. And all we wanted to do was argue the fact of why we were right. And you can't really get far in conversations if you're just arguing the point of why you're right. Like, that takes you nowhere.
I remember saying, you know what, I'm not gonna, like, I gave up on a lot of arguments, like the debates, and I said, I'll win. Internally, I said to myself, I'll win this when it comes down to it, right? And then when it came down to it, I didn't know that when we went to the hospital, so I lost. But at the end of the day, we won, because we came together and decided that ultimately that wasn't the best decision.
Yeah, so I've started noticing, afterwards, a pattern that a lot of the decisions that came to me, it wasn't necessarily because I had done all this research or I knew all this thing. It was mother's intuition is all it was. It was a knowing inside me that came through that I didn't even know it was there. I didn't know I was going to say no to vaccines. I didn't know I was going to say no to these things, but this something inside me was just like, no, that doesn't feel good. That doesn't make sense. And then was that I dove into the research on like, wait, why am I having these feelings? Why am I having these thoughts? Why do I want it to go this way? And I had no idea that it was just intuition. It was my gut. It was, in whatever innate wisdom I have speaking through me. And the thing is, as mothers, we all have that before we have children. We all have that. It's literally in our DNA. Like that is why mother's mother, right? Because that is in our DNA. As a woman, we all have that. And I didn't know at the time that I was tapping into those places, to And that's why I questioned it, because I was like, where's this coming from? This isn't what I think. I was like, where's this feeling of no coming from? You know, I said yes to the vaccines. I said yes to the circumcision. Why is it all of a sudden I don't want to do any of this? And it was that, yeah, we lost connection again. Okay, we're back. Yeah, it was just that mother's knowing. So I think after that, pretty much, you know, everything else was somewhat regular. We went home. I did have a little, I think I should turn off the Wi-Fi. Sorry, I'm turning off the Wi-Fi because it, there we go. All right, we're back. I turned off the Wi-Fi because we keep having issues with that. But after that, everything kind of went you know, somewhat regular. I had a little, well, I wouldn't say regular. It was rough, actually.
Yeah, so let's use that, or go ahead.
No, I was gonna say after that, the lack of sleep, you only had like what, 3 days off? Yeah.
No, I got 10 days, but
10 days. It felt like
we were
3.
in the hospital, what, for 2?
Yeah,
So my 10 days started when I was at
Yeah.
first in the hospital, so I was only home for 8 days after. And it, you know, Grayson, he had the same pattern. He would like cry from 10 to 1 a.m., 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. or 2
nonstop.
or 2 p.m. or 2 a.m. nonstop. The only thing that would soothe him,
Was running water.
running the bath water and
Yeah.
sitting on the toilet next to the bath water and just like bouncing him,
Yeah.
right? And it was rough for both of us, but I remember like, hey, I have to go to work. Like my job is going to work. You have to do this.
Yep.
And that was like, I was pushing that on her, right?
I remember one night, I, you know, of course, exhausted. I'm breastfeeding every hour, every 2 hours. And I literally felt like I just couldn't do it anymore. I was just like, I am dying inside. Like, I need fucking help. And I was like, Alex, please, can you please take the baby? I started pumping right away. I didn't know you were supposed to wait a little bit. And because of that, I had like an oversupply of milk. So we always had milk in bottles in the fridge or frozen or whatever. And I remember telling him, you know, can you please just get a bottle and feed him? I said, I need to sleep at least 2 hours. And he said, that's your fucking job. My job is going to work in 2 hours. So you need to do this because I need my fucking sleep so I can go to work. And I just remember thinking, oh my goodness, you are so lucky we have a baby because I would slit your throat right now. I wanted to kill him. I was just like, what the fuck is wrong with him? I was like, who says that? Like, if he knew how I felt right now, he would not be saying that to me. And that's when I just kind of, you know, I was just like, I'm doing this on my own. Like, I don't have a partner to help me do this. Like, this is my baby. This is my job. And that's kind of why after that, I kind of took the attitude, you don't have a say in what happens to this baby because you don't want to be there at 4 a.m. when it's hard. So no, you don't get a say in what he gets to do or how he gets to do it. I'm like, you want your job? Go to your job. This is my job. And it was just like very clear to me at that point that he wasn't ready to be a father. You know, he didn't want to be a father at that time. Like that wasn't his focus.
Yeah, there's a lot that comes up there. Obviously, you know, it's like, it's something that I process a lot, but you know, we'll continue to talk about that as this grows. I had a question that just popped up to me is like, so through mostly that negative experience, probably all of it, the hospital experience, how has that transformed or how did that change the course for you with the previous 3 births?
So after that, we moved to Italy, and shortly after we got there, we found out we were pregnant again. And Grayson was like 15, 18 months, something around there. He was, I don't know, I think it was 15 months. Yeah, he was 15 months. And yeah, we get to Italy, I find out I'm pregnant, and I kind of just go through the whole thing again. I go to the hospital, and around 20 something weeks, I already knew I wanted to have a home birth because I had said that to him. I said, the next one won't be in the hospital. And the biggest thing with that is like, you can have a birth plan. They don't give a shit. At least the majority of them won't. Because at the end of the day, once again, it goes back to their hospital protocols. So you can have your birth plan and some women will say, they did everything in my birth plan. That means that you had an ideal birth of what they wanted, so they didn't have to intervene.
Can I interject for a second
Yeah.
too? And we'll get into this a little bit, but I think that's where the male perspective, like the male role comes into play of being that supportive factor of enforcing a birth plan.
Yeah, but do you want to do that?
No,
Do you want to be fighting a system, or do
Yeah.
you want to be where your guard is down?
No,
You can
yeah.
enjoy the process.
Well, no, don't get me wrong. I'm 100% supportive and I would push people to home birth and free birth, right? But if there's someone that's out there that's listening to this, that's like, I'm gonna do a hospital birth, but how can I be a better supportive role as a man? Like, it comes into it's showing and fighting for the birth plan that you and your wife come up with. And using, because I remember the first one, right? Like we had talked about like the K2 shot or the K2 group.
Vitamin K shot.
Yeah, vitamin K shot and
And the
things.
goop, the
and
eye goop, and then Pitocin for me, which they gave me the
Pitocin for me,
Pitocin
but I
shot.
was never like, I didn't stand up. And because I was like, I wasn't 100, it wasn't a full body yes, right? And so that's what I'm saying is like, as a male, like that's one area you could step in, even if it's in that hospital experience. By no means am I like pushing you towards that, but show up for your spouse. And
I mean, I would advise just if you have a plan and it doesn't sound like something a hospital would typically do, just don't go to the hospital, because that plan is gonna go right out the window and you can hand it to them. They don't give a shit. At the end of the day, there are hospital protocols that go above everything else, not your wants and needs. And once again, just like everything, this doesn't happen in every single situation. Some women love their hospital births. Some women say they had amazing experiences, and that's great. It's about what you want. It's about the experience you want to have. And if you feel safe in the hospital, then by all means, go walk yourself inside a hospital, because that is where you feel the safest. But if for whatever reason you're having an inkling of this doesn't feel safe, this isn't what I want, or, I want to have this and this and this and this, but they're not going to let me have that, then that's when you should start questioning. It's like, okay, well, where can I have what I want? And I'm very much about having what you want. So yeah, our second birth or second pregnancy, my second pregnancy, I went through the whole, system again. And then it was like 20-ish weeks. I brought it up to the OBGYN. I said, oh, I want to have a home birth. How do I get a midwife out here? Because we're in Italy, we're living on base. I don't speak Italian. As much as I communicated with them in Spanish, I was like, I don't know how an Italian midwife and me is gonna work. And then of course they're like, yeah, the hospital doesn't even have, I don't think they had any midwives. It was all OBs. It was all OBs in the hospital, no midwives. So I knew that if I did get a midwife, it would be an Italian midwife. And he goes, oh yeah, we don't do that out here. And that was the end of the conversation. There's no discussion, nothing. It was just, we don't do that here.
And that's when it transformed to a free birth.
And then I go home and I'm sitting with this for weeks. And I was like, they don't do a home birth. And every day I'm like, they don't do a home birth. And in my head, I was like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I was like, I'm not. And I remember with the first, we packed the hospital bag, probably by like halfway, right?
Yeah.
Like by 20 weeks, the hospital bag was packed. And this one, I get to like 30 weeks. And I would stare at the dresser and I would stare at the suitcase, and something in me just like, nope, not packing it. And it was like this process. Like I would go into the boys' room because I had Grayson at the time, and I would get him dressed, and I'm looking at all the baby stuff and I'm looking at the suitcase and I'm like, nope. And I was like, something in my body just like, I couldn't get myself to physically pick up the items and put them into the suitcase. Like I just couldn't do it. And I was like, but he said you can't have a home birth. Like just fucking pack the hospital bag. You're going to the hospital. And I'm like, no. And I'm having this argument with myself, like as the weeks go on, and I just keep arguing back and forth with myself. By then I was more aware of more natural ways of, calming yourself, breathing during labor to try to help, so it wouldn't be so painful and whatnot. And I didn't really want to be like screaming my head off and all this stuff. So I found hypnobirthing. Sorry, airplanes going by. I found hypnobirthing. I don't remember how I came across it. It probably was like a Facebook group or something. So I started looking at hypnobirthing videos on YouTube, and the recommended videos came up, and it's like free birth, natural birth, whatever. And the clip is like this woman is squatting down with this black yoga mat in a creek. And I was like, what the fuck is she doing? I was like, who gives birth in a creek? I was like, I gotta watch this. It was like 30 minutes. And I was like, yep, I'm watching it. And you actually cannot find that video on YouTube anymore. I don't know why, but it had over like 5 million views or more than that. It was like insanely viral video. You can probably find snippets of it, things like that, but I can't find that original full version video anymore on YouTube. So I watched it, and this woman is, her husband, you can hear him on the camera. She has a couple of kids, and she's just giving birth in a creek. And I'm like, what the heck is that? And that's the first time I heard the term free birth. And I was like, what is free birth? So then of course I go on YouTube and I type in free birth and all these videos, and I start watching. I binge watched so many hours of these women giving birth, random places, different places, all by themselves, no midwives, no doctors, no doulas, no anything. A lot of them completely by themselves. One that like blew my mind was like, she was like on her 7th child. And yeah, she was like completely by herself. I don't know where all her kids went. And and it just like opened me up. And I went to him and I was like, that's what I'm doing. And he's like, what? I was like, I'm just gonna give birth at home by myself. And he's like, no, you're not. And I was like, okay, you go ahead and try and carry me to the car while I'm in labor, and we'll see how that goes for you.
Yeah, I mean, I still wasn't on board with free birthing on the second. Was I a little bit more open to a home birth?
Yes, I
I
remember.
was.
Yes, he said that the home birth was fine.
Yeah.
As long as there was a midwife, it would be okay.
Yeah, but I wasn't open to free birth, so I did push back a lot. And even when she started going in labor at home, and you could feel the anxiety, you could feel the fear, like in the YouTube video that she put up on YouTube. There's a point where she's like, Alex, give me, like, just get out, give me space. I don't know the exact words, but she pushed me out because my energy, it was projection. I was projecting on her like the space, you could feel it.
Yeah. So after that, I didn't tell the doctor my plans because I knew he would be against it. I did keep going till my last possible appointment. And then when it came time to birth, I knew how I wanted everything set up, and it was set up. And
I remember my fault. I remember my biggest fight on free birthing initially was my command, like the installation CMC COX. So like I was gonna get in trouble. Like
yeah,
I
that
was
a big
solely
thing.
like, I'm gonna get in trouble. We're going against what base policy. Like I was all about the black and white
And I said, okay, if a woman mistakenly has a baby, are you gonna get in trouble? Like if a baby comes out? And I was like, no, right? So I said, worst comes to worst, say it was a fucking mistake. Say labor happened very fast. You were sleeping, you had no idea. Like use whatever the fuck excuse you want. I was like, but I'm not going to the hospital.
yeah.
I said, I'm not going just because you're afraid of what will happen. And I had actually randomly, I don't know what I Googled or what I searched for in a group. I found this one woman whose husband was also in the military, and they were in Germany, and she actually free birthed in Germany. So I was in contact with her, and I said, like, what did you do? What do I have to know? And, she basically explained to me, like, it would just be considered a local birth. So at the end of the day, base may or may not help you, but you would just go report your birth as a local, like the locals do. And then from there, the base should take over to, because we needed an American passport and all that,
Yeah.
and social security number. But she's like, you do need to report the birth locally, in the province where you give birth.
Yeah.
But yeah, after I spoke to her, I was really like set, because I was a little afraid of like, well, what would they do? But after I spoke to her, I was like, yeah, I don't care. I was like, whatever happens, happens. I was like, I'm giving birth at home. Like, I'm not going to the hospital. But yeah, his birth, everything, went smoothly. Afterwards, An hour later, after I gave birth, you can see the video, like you said, it's on YouTube. He comes up to me, he's like, I don't want you to get mad, but I called the ambulance. And I was like, you know what? At that point, I was like, I don't care. I already gave birth. Like, whatever. He's like, they're here. Can they come up? I'm like, sure. So I'm gonna come on up.
Well, you know what's crazy is I called the ambulance like 45 minutes before, but in Italy, like, being on a base, like all the corpsmen and
It
I don't,
just took
I
forever.
don't
to-
even think that there was a doctor there. It was
No.
just it was just the corpsmen that came up
Yeah,
and we're like, yeah, so we're gonna cut the cord and
yeah. So they cut
we'll
the
take her,
cord.
we'll take her to the hospital.
The cord was already white. Like I said, it had been about an hour afterwards. They clamped it, they cut it. They did all their checks and they're like, yeah, everything looks fine. And then they're like, okay, let's go downstairs. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm not going with you. He's like, we really highly, I was like, they're literally a couple of fucking kids.
They were E3s.
They were like in their early 20s
Yeah, yeah.
and they're trying to tell me what to do. And I'm just like, you don't even know how to use your dick yet, but you want to tell me to go to the hospital? Like, yeah, no, I don't need you telling me what I need to do right now with me or my kid.
Oh, and then
Yeah, I think we've been
we've been on for an hour and 2 minutes. Here, we'll just finish here.
what do you mean finish here?
We're on live recording.
Yeah, but we can do a second one. Can you share afterwards? Like even if I don't share now?
I don't think so. Our first time on IG Live. Well, now it's our second because this is
Yeah, I've never done this before. But anyway, so I say no to them. I decline going to the hospital. And they're like, they highly advise against it. They make me sign something because I declined the ride into the hospital. I was a little annoyed with him after that. And I was just like, oh, like here he is again, not trusting the process. He wasn't happy that I didn't take the baby to the hospital. I was like, what is there to check? I was like, the baby's fine. He's pink. He's breastfeeding. He's, like everything's fine. I think by day 2, he's kept pushing to go to the hospital. So I'm like, you know what? Fine. So we take him to the hospital. They do all their pokes and prodding, and all that stuff. And granted, everything's fine. But I got verbally harassed by one doctor, because the story was that we weren't going to admit that it was a free birth. And I said, you know what? I'm owning that shit. I was like, if they ask me, and I didn't tell him this, I was like, if they ask me, I'm going to tell them my free birth. You know why? Because I don't care. And I'm not scared of what they're going to do. So when the doctor was like, so, he's asking me all these questions and he's like, was it a mistake? Was it too fast? Like what happened? I said, no. I said, I made a choice and I had my baby at home. And of course, you are so irresponsible. And I just cut him off. I said, excuse me. I said, actually, no. I said, I don't feel any of those things. I was not being irresponsible. I knew exactly the choice I made and exactly what could happen. And at no moment was I afraid of any of those things happening. So no, I said, I'm not going to listen to this. And he just kind of, and I was shaking when I was saying that. I was by no means like, oh yeah, like I was like, I got out of there and I was like, I was so fucking bad. And I was, I just gave birth. I was so emotional. And I was so mad at him because I felt like, he forced me to go there, which granted he didn't. It was my choice. I never had to get in the car. I never had to take my child there. But I was mad because if you see, I was like, this is what happens in hospitals, is that they come back and they fucking like smack you across the face and take all your joy away of breathing the way you want, because they don't understand. They don't.
Yeah, and I remember that interaction was the defining moment in me really opening up into like free birthing, right? Because we had done it, you done it, I witnessed it, and I'm like, okay, it's not that bad after the fact. And I opened up, and then the second defining moment was when like he had to get his blood drawn at the hospital and they're like squeezing his foot and making it, and it looked just like,
It's like the PKU test, I think.
yeah, it was a bunch of blood tests
I-
that like you know, and Grayson was really upset. Our oldest was really upset that that was happening to his baby
Yeah.
brother. And so like that combination right there made me realize like, we're gonna free birth and I need to get fully on board. So I need to do the research that makes me feel comfortable to be able to be in that space and be supportive in whichever way comes. And so, you know, what's funny is it all came out, you know, I mentioned I was scared about what my command would think and, you know, the backlash I would receive on the Navy side. And the base command master chief, the highest enlisted, said, you know, we should, in jokingly manner, he's like, we should write you a NAM. You saved the Navy $15,000, right? And then, you know, like the CO and XO just, you know, congratulated me on being another, another father again. And there was never once them telling me like, oh, you should have done this, this, and this.
We
And-
became the talk of the town. Nobody knew it was me. Everyone just knew that someone gave birth in the, you know, base housing. And I remember women during playgroups were like, did you hear about that woman? And I would be like, yeah, that was me. They're like, oh, because everybody was like talking about the woman
your
who gave,
face.
who gave birth by herself in, you know, base housing. To me, it wasn't like this heroic thing to do. It was just what I knew I wanted and what I knew was right for me and my baby at the time. It wasn't something like I wanted everyone to know or anything of that sort. Like I even told him at the time, I was like, you better not tell anyone I'm laboring when it starts. So I was like, which he did. And I was so mad because I was like, I don't want anyone to ruin this experience for me. And it wasn't something that I was really trying to get a whole bunch of people on board, like knowing that it was happening. I don't really have anything else there.
You know, I mean, that's just the big piece of like that, you know, I started to do more research after that birth. Once we found out that we were pregnant again, I did more research and was becoming more on board with free birth. And I remember you telling me, like, you need to figure out what you're scared of, like
Yeah.
what's coming up for you because it's projecting out like it projected out in the last birth. So you can be there in a more supportive capacity and like me want you there. And like that was the first time where I was like, damn, my wife doesn't even want me in the room when she's birthing because you know I can't even control my own energy. And I didn't know how to, and I wasn't at that point to like figure it out either. But my main thing was learning about like my fears, which my biggest fear was like my wife hemorrhaging and dying or the baby, you know, like choking or not breathing right out after birth. And that was freaking me out, you know? And so I did research on that. There's a book that you had given me. I forgot the name.
The
of it.
unassisted baby.
The Unassisted Baby, that in the very back of the book on the last couple chapters, it actually is like a chart, right? In the Navy, we have troubleshooting charts. So it was like a troubleshooting chart, like if this, then this, right? And I remember like if bleeding doesn't stop for the mom, you chew or you eat the placenta, take a bite of this placenta. And
Or suck on the umbilical cord or because it's oxytocin that stops that from happening, which is why they give you a Pitocin shot because it is artificial oxytocin. And this is where birth playing its natural role is important because naturally our bodies produce what it needs so we don't bleed out, but it has to be in a physiological safe place. If you don't feel safe, if you cannot birth in a very held, safe, supported way, then your body isn't going to do the things that it has to naturally do. And that's what a lot of women don't realize. I'm not saying there isn't exceptions. Obviously, there's exceptions to everything, but the majority in a healthy average woman, her body will do what it needs to do so she doesn't hemorrhage, so these things don't happen. But birth has to go its natural route. And you know, the majority of animals, how do they give birth? Like we know when a cat or a dog is giving birth, leave them alone. They want to be in a dark place. They want to be in a small closet. You know, all of this applies to humans too. when I go into birthing, I want to feel like I'm in a cave. I want to go somewhere dark. I want to go somewhere quiet, or I want soft music playing. But we all reach a point, I know I did, where I was just like, turn the music off. I don't want to hear a pin drop, because you're literally going in so deep that they're distractions of like pulling you back out. It's like if you're trying to like meditate or going to hypnosis or something, and something just keeps like, like it pulls you out of that mindset. And it's very hard to do that while you're like trying to bring life into this world. And it's a very spiritual process too. It's not a physical thing only. There's a lot of things at play here. So yeah, it was just, I could feel everything, like your system is heightened. So him walking into the room, him talking to me, him asking all these little questions, and granted, he didn't know that, like, it was completely pulling me out of the zone. And I could feel like, without even looking at him, I knew he was standing there watching me, like, because I felt his presence come in, and it felt like this, like just throwing everything off. And I'm just like, what is going on? So I got better at being able to articulate that and explain that to him after our second birth. So when we found out we were pregnant with our third, I was very clear. I was like, I want you there, but I want you there in the right context. I was like, I don't want you there freaking out. I don't want you there asking me a million questions. Like, this is what I want. And
And because like I mentioned, not knowing, like not having those conversations with my parents, and not having men that I was talking to about this experience, I didn't know what direction to go in like learning, right? So like she fed me a lot of information to like digest. And this is, I'll jump into a little bit more, but this is why I think that there should be more men that jump into some programs or some resources that I'm gonna talk about here shortly, in knowing how to be in that support capacity, knowing where to get the information, because more and more we're moving from what I'm seeing, more and more we're moving from hospital births to home births. Yeah, there's still a lot of hospital births, but there's more and more home births and free births happening
Yeah.
every day. And so for the male perspective, like how can we educate ourselves or have that support group with other men that have been through it or that have that knowledge to better provide a safe space for our wife. And so like when I was mentioning the unassisted baby, like when I was reading that, I remember reading out loud, I figured it out, like I felt more comfortable knowing like, hey, this is what you do if this.
Which I had told him all this,
Yeah.
but he had to
Yeah.
read it for himself. And that's one thing I kept telling him. I was like, I can tell you all the things. I can feed you all this information. If you don't want to look for it yourself, you're just not going to retain it. You're not going to remember. So I stopped and I was like, no, this is your job. I was like, it's not my job to educate you. It's not my job to inform you. I'm like, that is your job. If you care enough, you will do it. And at the time, he spent hours watching sports, highlights and games and this. And I'm like, you got time to do that. Like, you got time for this. I was like, you just don't care to. And I was like, and it's not my job to make you care. I said, but then that means you also do not get to have a say. I said, if you're not going to look into it, you're not going to take your time to research this, look into it, then, it's like saying, hey, let's buy a house. And one person doesn't care about anything, but they're like, that's not what I want. I want
Yeah.
this. No,
And
we need
yeah.
this type of fence or this type of flooring, not knowing any idea what any of those materials are. It's like, well, why do you have a say when you don't know anything about, building a house?
So I will say a few things helped us even more in this aspect is towards the end of the pregnancy, we were having a lot of marital problems, to be quite honest. I was like, once again, more focused on my job and I wasn't meeting my wife on the emotional level and the spiritual level, and even at home doing like the, helping out and being a contributing member to the household, like with the chores and things. And so we started going to marriage counseling, and towards the end, just so say, hey, like, I don't want to give birth here. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like,
This is for my third birth.
yeah, for our
Yeah.
third birth. And I just signed an extension to be in Italy for another year. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean?
Hi, Alex. She was from the festival. Good to see you on here.
I love your name. But like, what do you mean you wanna like leave and not birth here? And she's like, look, I'm going back. You either come or you don't come. But
Yeah,
I'm
I wanted to go stateside, so we were still in Italy. I was supposed to give birth out there because we were gonna be there for a year after I gave birth. And the closer we got to it, I didn't have a support system. We were living up on the side of Mount Etna. It's a active volcano in Sicily. And I had like 5 or 6 neighbors. We lived in a very seasonal area where people would come during the summer, but during the winter and fall, it was pretty dead. Not a lot of neighbors. I didn't speak Italian. They didn't speak Spanish.
we didn't have
And-
central heating and air, so like it was
Well,
propane
no,
heating.
that didn't bother me.
It
It was-
bothered me.
Okay, no, my thing was that the house was, the houses in Italy, it was all fenced in. So you're like living inside a box. And even when you go outside of your box, you're still in a box. So there was really no way to interact with the neighbors unless you like went up to their gate and like knocked on their door. And I was not that motivated to go do that. So I was very secluded and I was by myself and I was up there often by myself. And at the time, Caden would cry bloody murder to get into his car seat. So I didn't go to a lot of places. I didn't go out much during like the first year of his life. And that's what I started imagining. I said, if I have another kid, they hate their car seat, what am I going to do? I'm out here on the side of the mountain by myself. He's working all day long. He's gone for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. I'm going to be depressed. I'm going to be miserable. And I knew that because I was like, now I have 3 kids. I'm going to need help. I'm going to need assistance. And I was like, I'd rather go back stateside where things are a little bit easier, where I understand things better. And granted, we could have moved towns to make that easier. But at that point, I was kind of done living out of the country. Yeah, so I was ready to come back to the States.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
Came back.
where I was going with that, was that between the marriage problems and actually having it there, like going through marriage counseling, and we started talking more about like the expectations of being a father and being a spouse. And when we got back stateside, we only had about three weeks. I think you gave birth like 3 weeks later.
Yeah, like a month. Yeah.
And in those 3 weeks, I really leaned into like getting better with projecting my energy. And when it came time for Lenabelle, our third, which we didn't know the sex of it. And I say that for a specific reason, like she went into labor at like 5 a.m. and Lenabelle was here at like 7:09 in the morning, and we had a photographer. So we called when she started laboring, we called right away. She gave birth, a water birth, which I know she'll talk about a little bit more, but she gave a water birth in our apartment in Virginia Beach. And when I saw Lenabelle, and like I was calm, cool, collected, like I felt so much better compared to the previous 2 births. I was there, present for her. I wasn't somewhere else, like thinking, like having fear and anything of that nature. And I was able to fully enjoy when Lenabelle came out and I saw that it was a little baby girl. I melted, I got so excited. And it was just an amazing experience for me. When you look back at it compared to my previous 2, where there wasn't that connection. And it looks, and it kind of relates into a connection. When you look at it now, is like Lenabelle and I are probably the most connected. And yes, we've had other hurdles with her, but like I just have a deeper connection with Lenabelle, and it's just feels a little different.
Yeah, so Lenabelle's birth, he definitely showed up different, completely different. I still felt a little bit of the nerves, but I think that's normal. But yeah, he was super chill, did everything that, I was asking him, like setting up as far as that. It was the only thing that he started doing that I was like, this has to stop, was that he kept coming in and out of the bathroom. He was like, go out into the living room, come back in. And he kept doing that. He's like, well, I'm just checking on the kids. I was like, leave the kids alone. I was like, if they need our help, they will come find us. I said, but I cannot have you going in and out. And, you know, it's hard to explain this unless you've been in labor or you've had children. It's just, once again, your whole body feels everything in the room, every energy, everything, and that constant change of back and forth of someone leaving or people even whispering, people even talking. It's something to be extremely aware if you're ever invited into a birthing space. Is you need to sit in a corner and be the wall, be the paint on the wall. If you're doing more than that, chances are you are distracting the birthing mother. And people don't realize, like, even if you're in the room, like, you have energy. We are energetic creatures, you know, like this isn't a secret, you know, when you touch something, like you can zap it, like that's electricity, like our bodies are made of this, people can feel that. So if you're not aware of that, then you probably shouldn't invite yourself or be in other people's birthing spaces. But if you are invited into someone, make sure you calm yourself, you cleanse yourself before you join that space, because people feel that. And my photographer was amazing. We had some great photos. And after the experience, I told him, I said, it wasn't that our photographer wasn't great or anything. I said, I don't know if I want that extra person in the room for the next time. I said, it didn't like feel that good. And one, you know, funny rule that we have in the birthing world that we say is like, if they can't watch you poop, then they probably shouldn't watch you birth. It's like, and if they can't watch you having sex, then they probably shouldn't watch you having birth. And it's very true. You know, it's a very intimate, sensual time, and people don't see it for that, but it is. And having anyone else that you wouldn't feel comfortable doing those things with, it's gonna feel kind of weird. Like you have it in the back of your head, like you're kind of thinking about it. You're like, oh, well, should I do that? Because so-and-so is right there. Like, for instance, let's say you want to put your butt up in the air. Like, do you really want to have your butt cheeks spread and your butthole in somebody's face that has never seen it? No, like you're gonna think about that before you do it. But you don't want to limit yourself to what you do when you're giving birth. Like, you want to scream, you want to put your butt up in the air, then do that. Then make sure that the people there you're comfortable doing that with. My mom was actually in the apartment at the time, and I did not wake her
We
up
didn't wake her up.
because I know she had all great intentions, but her anxiety would have been through the roof. And I was like, yep, nope, not doing that. So we never woke her up. And I was making noises, and she did not wake up till after Linneval already had arrived. And it was one of the boys that ran. It was like, she was like,
Yeah,
and she couldn't
was, like,
believe
caught off
it.
guard.
She could not believe it. So then she came and joined us. But it was a better experience. You had limited time off this time again.
Yeah, I had limited time off, but
You took a week and then you took another week later. Wasn't it like
I
that?
took 14 days initially, and then I took another
Okay.
couple weeks, a few weeks.
Oh, yeah.
later.
Postpartum with Kaden, our second, he actually had like 30 days in the house, which was amazing.
Yeah.
So he was mostly with Grayson, and I didn't really have to worry about Grayson, you know, like our oldest at the time. With Linneval, he had the 14 days. My parents also came into town. So I had some support assistance for the first few weeks. But I'll honestly say, ideally, if you want to create a support system, you want to aim for like 3 months. It takes about 3 months before you start feeling like you're back on your feet, and you can start, especially with multiple kids, and you can like start handling things better. And even after that, you still want to have support here and there. So one thing, like, women ask us, like, what do I need to know about birth and this? I was like, don't forget postpartum. Like, do not forget postpartum. If you're going to spend hundreds of dollars on something, like, instead of making it the perfect nursery room, get the bare necessities, because infants do not need a lot, and get postpartum support. Like, that is a huge thing that people overlook, is postpartum support. Because when you find yourself alone with this tiny baby and you can't get in the shower and you can't make a meal and this and that, and it's just around the clock nonstop, you're gonna want that support. I don't know if you have anything else about Linneval's birth story.
I just wanted to add, that was the first time that we had ever done what is it, Lotus?
Oh, yeah, we did a lotus birth.
We
That's
did a
right.
lotus birth, which I thought was really cool. Lotus birth is where you leave the umbilical cord on until it falls off on its own. You obviously,
So it's attached to the placenta.
yeah, it's attached.
Some
to-
people get confused about this. So the placenta is the only organ we ever grow during birth. It's not in our body prior to being pregnant, but while we are pregnant, we grow a whole organ to house the baby. When the baby comes out, the cord is attached to the placenta, still inside the mother. Well, the placenta eventually comes out. So then you have placenta, cord in the belly button, baby. So you can hold the two. I'm explaining this for people who don't know, because people get very confused about this sometimes. So what you do is you can, like a piece of meat, salt the placenta so it doesn't smell, because it is an organ. It will smell like dead meat. Ours never smelled. And then you change that every few hours. The first few days, it's obviously a lot, it's very wet, it's very moist. So putting like towels under it so it can soak up that moisture, and then changing that out every how many hours you need. So it never gets a smell. And then you can put herbs to make it smell good. We use like lavender and
Yeah.
some other herbs, and it actually smelled really good. It never smelled, it was never gross.
What I liked about that though was it really made you and us slow down.
Yeah.
Right? We didn't, with Linabelle's birth, we weren't active.
I didn't leave the bed for like a week. I
Yeah,
think. Yeah.
we weren't as active where like Kaden and Grayson, like
Yeah.
she was moving in a few days, right? And I at the time, I didn't know the importance or I didn't fight. I don't want to use the word fight. I didn't advocate for her to be like, hey, stay in bed. Like, let me do this. Let me do this. I knew that like, I looking back at that time of my life, I was depressed. And so like any chance I had, I'd be like, hey, take these kids, like, hey, take these kids. Like, I didn't know how, like, I was overwhelmed by them. And so like looking at Linabelle, we had that
Slow down.
that slowdown where we were able to just relax, and we didn't go and like do stuff, and put her body under stress and move Linabelle often.
And also it helps with, if you have people coming over, people are not as open to holding the baby because they're scared. They're scared that they're gonna hurt her. It's the umbilical cord is still attached and all that. So it's also a way of enforcing that bond of mother and baby.
Yeah.
People don't need to hold your baby the moment it's born. That's the mom's job. You want the baby to bond with you. You want the baby to smell you. You want to smell the baby. So a big thing that we stopped doing was, I think it happened to Grayson, is they washed his head. You actually want to steer away from washing a newborn's head, because that smell that newborns have, that most people know, like when you smell a newborn, they smell delicious. That is meant for the mother. That is what builds that rush of oxytocin in our body. That is what helps us produce milk. That is, once again, everything has a reason of why it's there, why it exists. So after Grayson, we didn't wash the heads of our second, third, or fourth for a long time, because we knew the importance of smelling that, of
Yeah.
having that around. So yeah, with the Lotus birth, after 3 days, the umbilical cord dried up, fell off, and we froze the placenta. And
And we
then,
kept it. until
yeah,
this-
we kept it. Yeah,
Yeah.
until recently we planted it. Then there's Lumi. Uh, Lumi. So yeah, so we're Linabelle. I went to an OB because we were still in Italy for 10 weeks. That was it. So like 8 appointments, 6 appointments, something like that. It wasn't many appointments. And I already knew I was going to free birth. And I just went mostly because we did need it on record for us to be able to get like social security number,
Especially if you're
birth
over in
certificate,
Italy.
yeah, and passport, because we thought we were gonna birth in Italy. So I was like, I do need to go to the hospital and at least make it be known
Yeah.
that I am pregnant and I am having a baby. So I was like, I want to cause the least resistance when it comes to getting all her paperwork so we can get back stateside. But then we ended up going stateside. And after I came back stateside, I went once to check in so they would know that I was stateside.
Yeah.
And that was it. After that, I was just like, okay, done. Once again, because I needed something in Virginia for them to know that I was here and I was pregnant.
Yeah.
So then I could go file all that stuff.
So with Lumi, we just got the proof of pregnancy. So you
Yeah,
went,
so
we
with-
went the first time to get the proof of pregnancy.
And that actually wasn't enough. So I had a little more trouble with my last child getting her birth certificate, getting her social. Her social took, well, she was born March 4, 2020. So we all know what a shit crazy year that was. So it took a year and a half before we got her social security number and her birth certificate. No, it took like a year for her birth certificate, another 6 months for her social.
Yeah.
So it was it took a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, with Lumi, I didn't go to any OB appointments at all. I did not do any checks at home. I didn't do what the hospital does. It just felt unnecessary to me. I know my body. I knew I was growing. I knew I was fine. Some women will replicate what a hospital does at home. That's fine if you feel safer with that. I didn't feel like any of that was necessary, so I didn't bother. I just went around my life as normal. At the time, we had just opened up the restaurant, so I was working full time, taking care of 3 other little kids, dropping them off at their unschooling school, and I would go to work. And
Well, the oxymoron.
I know
unschooling
everybody's like, what
school.
does that even mean? Well,
I would
it's
say unschooling academy.
well, it was a school, private school, but it was a child-led
Yeah.
private.
I didn't
school.
mean to throw you off there. I just thought that was.
Yeah. I mean, everybody's like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
It's like, it just means they're free to do what they want within that environment.
Yeah.
They still had, like teachers and leaders and activities and books and things like that. But anyway, once I got closer to my birthing time, I stopped working. I hired a manager, had them take over full time, and I just went back to being at home with the kids. And her birth was another 2-hour, very quick birth. And this time all the kids got to be there, and
They all woke up on their own too?
no, I think you woke them up. No?
No, I didn't.
Oh, I don't remember.
Yeah,
I was like, I don't remember
The
that
boy,
part.
well, Linnevo woke up because we turned the
Linnevo-
lights on.
Linnevo was awake. I remember that. Yes.
And then Kaden and Grayson, who were asleep, they fell asleep in the living room that day, woke up and came in on their own.
Okay, yeah.
Cause you know what? Because you were screaming. I remember I was making a joke. I made a joke that you were like being loud for the neighbors.
Oh, that was afterwards. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I'm saying in the beginning when they woke up, no, I think Grayson was, his typical woke up from the night, came into our room, and then we're like, the baby's coming. So then they went to the living room and watched TV because I was like, I need some space. I was like, I don't want them in here right now.
Yeah,
Cause then they kept asking me, they're like, is the baby here yet? Is the baby here yet?
yeah.
Is it coming? Is it here? And I was like, please go put a movie on. Cause I don't need them asking me this every 5 minutes. Grayson was really excited about it. But yeah, it was another very quick 2-hour, both of my girls were 2 hours. Kaden was 7, Grayson was 12. 2-hour birth. This one was more from like 3:30 to like 5:29 in the morning. And yeah, everything flowed so great and it felt so good this time. I don't really have much to say about that birth because by now you were just like, yeah. Cool,
Well,
yeah.
I think that for me, what stood out and I enjoyed thoroughly is that I got to be like a more present part, right? So you would ask me to put pressure on
Yeah.
your back as you like just moved. And, like.
Yeah, before I didn't want him touching me or
Yeah.
getting near me or anything. And this time I was like, all right, he's cool like a cucumber. You can touch me. I need help right here, actually.
Yeah, so I got to help and we were in that position, like she was there when the baby started to come out. And then like, as I was pushing on her back,
Yeah.
she dropped down.
Yeah, I had tons of back labor with my last one. My back felt like it was ripping apart and I was like, just push. And I'm like, harder. I'm like, you're not strong
Yeah.
enough. And he's like, I'm pushing really hard. I was like, push 10 times harder.
Yeah.
Uh,
So I say that, right, because, I got to be more involved in that, but secondly, I want to just highlight, as I've done my journey through men's work, which is not even close to be finished, we're just at the beginning. I came across a man called Ryan Pope, and I've been doing a lot of research. I've been talking to him back and forth for a few months now, and he does a program. He has a container called Becoming the Mountain, that comes July 30th and 31st. I have no financial obligation, but I'm putting this out there because I think it's important. His program helps men, right, be in the support capacity in the way of like through body movement or through understanding what you're feeling, so you don't project that, holding safe space for your wife to just ever flow, like and not hindering that movement. So I didn't know any of that through all four. Like I was getting more knowledge by each birth, but I didn't have that support as from an outside man that like had all this wealth of knowledge. So I encourage men that are out there, or women that are wanting to go into free birth or home birth, that maybe their husband's not quite on board, but they need a little bit of push in the right direction. Throw that man, I'll put it in the comments so you can click on his Instagram page. But that's what we need in this, right? I had a post yesterday about men's role in the birthing process. We just lost, but we're back now. I had a Instagram live where we were talking about men's roles in the birthing process, and where we were not connected previously, like we weren't really involved, to now where I believe that we're overly involved and we were having this conversation. I feel like the middle approach is being able to be a supportive capacity of like just being there and creating that space and flowing with your wife and enjoying that process and understanding the intricate or the finer pieces of that process, so you can be more of a help and whatever way that may be. So either the body
Yeah,
movement or
and every
giving water.
woman is different, some women may not want their men there at all and not have that energy. Maybe they want a group of supporting sisters of women. Some women may want just their man there. Whichever, dynamic you want it to be. My whole thing is like, it's your choice. The birth you have, like, that is your choice. And in that choosing, taking full responsibility of what may happen. And that was like a big learning piece for me, is in free birth, there is no one to blame, right? You go to a hospital, something goes wrong, you can blame the doctor. You have a home birth with a midwife, you can blame the midwife. When free birth, I take full responsibility for whatever may happen. And and that's what he kept asking me. It's like, well, what about this happens? What about, I said, then I will have to live with that choice. So a big part of this is being so secure with yourself that you are able to take on whatever that situation may bring. And I asked myself those questions over the weeks after making that choice, with Cadence, like, okay, I'm going to free birth. I kept asking myself with that, if my baby dies, will I be okay owning that the rest of my life? If I die, well, I obviously can't think about it, but like, am I okay with that? If anything goes wrong, like, can I sit with that? Can I be with that? Can I figure that out? And I answered yes every time. It was a yes for me. I was like, whatever may happen, I can hold it, I can handle it. And not everyone's there, and that's okay. But ask yourself those hard questions. Wherever you feel resistance, why? If you have fear coming up, what is the fear? If you have anger coming up, what is that you need to let go of? And sitting with these feelings. A lot of this isn't from just seeing somebody else do it and say, okay, that looks cool, I want to do it. It's sitting with yourself in silence and with your own thoughts and asking yourself these questions and just answering it over and over and over to see, where does this really stem from? Where does this really come from? And that's what I did a lot through my process of getting to free birth. Whenever I had a fear come up or a thought come up, I'd ask myself, where does this come from? Where does this stem from? Why am I having this thought? Why do I feel that I can't, do this or that or whatever it may be? And it almost always came down to, I saw it somewhere, TV, social media, whatever, or someone taught it to me. And then I was like, okay, so if this isn't innate, if this isn't coming from inside me, then what is inside? And that's what a lot of this self-discovery is is brushing off the dirt, the dust, and everything that's been piled up on top of you and discovering who are you really at your core? Who are you? Who can you be? And what does that look like? And I kept asking myself that. It's like, who can I be? What does that look like? What if I were to have the birth I want, what would that look like? And I kept telling him, you know, even after our second free birth, our third, is like, this is what I envision. This is what I see. You know, this is what I want. And, you know, we got there. And
I've had many people ask me, like, how did you get on board? Like, what did
Yeah.
you do? And I analyze, I look back on it. If you're someone out there that's wanting your husband or your significant other to get on board, I encourage you to ask them a few questions of what fears come up for you, you know, like was that
well,
projected
the
on you?
first
or-
thing I would ask is, are you willing to do the work?
Well,
I think
Yeah,
that's the first question.
obviously, but we're,
Because of, well, I'm saying, like, if a man isn't willing, they're not gonna do it. They're just not gonna do it, you know, like, you weren't ready at the first free birth. Like, if I asked you, you didn't really know how.
well, you'd ask me like, hey, what are you scared of? And I told
Yeah,
you like three
You
things.
told me
right?
what you were scared
So
of, but
that's-
you didn't know how to.
Yeah, that's the basic question that I'm
Yeah.
talking about. I was like, okay, what are you scared of?
Yeah.
And then the second thing is, and I had some pushback on this, but like that's what happened for me is like, as the woman that, you know, wants that spouse there, like, hey, she had said, hey, here, like, take this on, right? And initially I pushed it away. I wasn't ready, but ultimately I came to it. I would encourage your husband or your significant other to surround himself with like-minded men, right? Because us as men, we have this lone wolf mentality where we want to keep to ourselves. We don't want to ask for help. We don't want to get in community, and it doesn't work. And it doesn't work in men's work. It doesn't work anywhere, in my opinion. Like, I've learned that community is where you want to be. And so, like, encourage your husband or your significant other to get into that.
And also a big thing for me was I never felt like I needed my husband's permission or I needed him to get on board. Like, that wasn't a thought process to me. Literally his response was, you're not doing that. I said, yes, I am. Because I knew what I wanted. So I always tell women is, well, what do you want? Do you want to make your husband feel good or your spouse feel good or your partner, your man, whatever? Is that what you want? Or do you want to make the choice you want to do? So that's something that you need to ask yourself. And for every woman, that answer is going to be different. You know, some women want to make their man happy, then cool, do that, make your man happy. But if you want to make yourself happy, then you don't need anyone's else approval. You don't need anyone else telling you, okay, I'm on board. Like, you just go and get and do what you need to do. And that's been, I think, a catalyst for the transformation in our relationship is that I kind of say, hey, I'm here and this is where I'm going. You do what you want. You meet me where you want to meet me, but I'm going this way. And you know, it hasn't always been easy. And that's what this whole, you know, page for us is about, is, you know, our journeys of, you know, weaving in and out, and how we're finally like at this point where we're soaring together. You know, we're finally at a point where we can have these hard conversations without, like, in the beginning, having blown out arguments or being mad at each other for days, and
Yeah.
you know, sharing these tools with other people, and how we do it now with, you know, 4 kids. It's a conscious daily effort to do it, you know, and when your spouse calls you out, not seeing it as a, you know, as a jab, is something like, oh shit, you know what? I am doing that, you know, thanks for calling me out on that. You know, it's not something like, oh, you know, you're getting at me about something. So that's what we hope to share with you guys here in the future. Our videos will be shorter. This is kind of like the intro video, so it was very long. But we will try to keep it under an hour from now on, and shoot us questions. Anything you want to talk about, elaborate on, you can direct message them or post them under our pictures. We'll be here every Friday live at different times, 5 a.m. work this time. Maybe next time is really late, but we will try to always post the
It goes
time.
on our kids' sleeping schedule.
Yeah, but we will always try to post the time, but we will be IG live every Friday, as long as internet and, we are an RV traveling family, so sometimes nothing has connection. So as long as we have some type of internet connection, we should be live. And if not, we'll be there sometime that week.
Yeah, no, I think for me, just to add on to what she said, right, is my vision for this page as well. Over the last 10 to 11 months, I've seen the most transformation in my life, not just between our relationship, but my relationship with myself. And so, yes, I have my own page, she has her own page, and we'll do our things with our coaching there. But I was in a place where I didn't have clarity for myself, so I didn't have clarity for us. And I know that there's many men out there that feel that same way. And sharing our story and helping other couples succeed, the easy way out is to leave the relationship, right? And not all people are meant for each other. I'm not sitting here like, oh, you need to stay in this relationship. But what I'm saying is the easy way out, when the connection breaks, when you start to lose connection with yourself and not know what you want, it's easy to break away. It's really challenging to consciously relate to that one person. And we've seen that transformation.
Yeah, we have many times where separation has come up, divorce has come up, and October being our most recent it was going to happen. We for the first time officially separated and divorce was on the table. But here we are.
Yeah. So that's I know we're an hour and 50 minutes in, but I think that it was a good start to a growing idea and vision.
Yeah.
So comment, message us, private message Jasil, private message me, or private message this page, and we would love to talk about any type of topics that are out there.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us
Thank
today.
you.
Bye.
Bye.